Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition, is sponsored by the City of Hazard. Come home to the mountains.
Good evening from WYMT Mountain News. I'm Neil Middleton. Thanks for joining us tonight. And for those watching on the web, thanks for logging on to WYMT.com. We are coming to you tonight from the East Kentucky Expo, where the second SOAR Summit just wrapped up. SOAR, which stands for Shaping Our Appalachian Region, attracted more than 1,200 people here today. The two men behind the summit, Governor Steve Beshear and Congressman Hal Rogers, are our guests tonight. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the first SOAR Summit was held 17 months ago. People gathered here to discuss their hopes and dreams and visions for Eastern Kentucky. Today was going to take what you learned then and you called it a strategy session to help implement a plan to move our region forward. What has happened since that first SOAR Summit 17 months ago? And Governor, let's start with you.
Neil, it's been amazing at how much has happened in 17 months. You know, when Congressman Rogers and I sat down over that summer before the first summit and we saw the drastic decline in the coal economy, people losing their jobs right and left, we looked at each other and said, you know, what can we do about this? And we decided to just try to get Eastern Kentucky together and let's talk about it. Let's figure out how we can diversify this economy. So we called that summit, and we were amazed at the thousands of people that came. You know, about 12, 14, 1,500 people came on a snowy day in December in Pikeville. From there, things have really taken off. You know, from a big perspective, I got the legislature to go along with the idea of four-laning the entire Mountain Parkway from Pikeville all the way back to 64. That's going to be done over the next several years. The Congressman and I had talked earlier about broadband, and we have now developed a high-speed broadband program that's going to build dark fiber all over the state, but we're going to start right here in Eastern Kentucky, and that's going to open this area up to the world. It's going to be a transformative event, I think, for Eastern Kentucky and for Kentucky in general. I got the legislature to put aside $2 million a year in coal severance money, and now that's in a development fund that can be used to help communities in Eastern Kentucky to develop that diverse economy. Our organization has come together. Congressman and I reached out, and we've got an executive committee together. We hired an executive director, Jared Arnett, who's an Eastern Kentuckian, who I think both of us feel is just perfect for this job. He's young, he's vigorous, he's an entrepreneur, he's an innovator, and that's just the kind of thinking that we're going to need here. So things are moving rapidly, and now here we are after work groups have come together and worked over the last year, listened to what people had to say, prepared recommendations, and now we look at this summit as starting to think about the strategy. How do you implement this? How do we make some of these things happen quickly and over the long term?
Congressman, what stands out to you after these first 17 months?
Well, the governor covered it pretty well. I think with me, the most important thing we've done yet is lay the groundwork for the broadband cable. If there's any one single thing that can rejuvenate the economy of East Kentucky, I think that's it. It will take time. But in communities that have good high-capacity, high-speed internet cable, they're able to attract industries and businesses that other people cannot attract. In fact, as the governor has said, having broad-based cable now is almost like having electricity in an earlier time in order to be able to recruit business. So I think that's probably the most important thing that we've got going. But as the governor says, there's so many others. These 10 working groups, you know, centered maybe one on agriculture, another on tourism, another on recruiting business, another on health issues and the like. They've been meeting all summer and going around the region listening to people, and they've had like 50 of those sessions this summer, last summer. And that's been compiled now into a record that we can work from. I think what we've been doing so far, Governor, is planning our work. We've been planning the work. Now it's time to work the plan. And that's what this summit is about. It's about commitment by Kentuckians to help their region. We're passing out cards for people to sign up. I'm committed to help you do so-and-so. So we're looking for commitment. We're looking for working the plan to make Eastern Kentucky a successful area.
We were talking during one of the breaks a little earlier about this broadband initiative, and the great thing about that is it breaks down a lot of the barriers. When you think about Eastern Kentucky, you think about roads, which we're going to talk about some improvements with roads coming up, but you think about the roads and the mountains, which are beautiful, but sometimes can act as a barrier. And with the broadband, it breaks down those barriers.
It levels the mountains. It takes away the historic hazards that we've had in attracting business into the communities that we live in. We didn't have the best roads, no major airport, no barge line, well, except on Big Sandy. But we didn't have all those assets that you normally think you have to attract business. Well, you don't need that with broadband. You can sit in your community and do the work from India if you want. And I think that puts Eastern Kentucky in the world market for the first time. You don't have to leave here to find work.
And that's what we want to do. We want to keep people here.
Well, and it also is going to enable, I think, a part of a future economy that's going to be vital to Eastern Kentucky, and that's your small business, your entrepreneurs. You're not going to see a whole lot of 5,000-person factories located, not just in Eastern Kentucky, but any other part of Kentucky. Those are few and far between. Every once in a while, we'll hit one of those, and that doesn't mean we don't go after them. But most of your jobs in Kentucky come from small business. 90% of our jobs come from businesses with fewer than 50 employees. Those are the kinds of businesses that will form in Eastern Kentucky, because that high-speed broadband tool will enable them to form and to do business around the world, right from here in Pikeville or over in Floyd County or Hazard, or you pick it. You'll be able to do it from that location.
You know, Neil, when we did the Pride cleanup campaign, I teamed up with the then Patton administration. Jim Bickford from Harlan County, General Bickford, was the Natural Resources Commissioner. And we decided we would take the federal agencies that I would try to recruit, and he would bring the state agencies to the cleanup cause of cleaning up East Kentucky. And it worked that way. We're doing a little bit of that now. The state, of course, represented by the governor and his agencies, are in this heavy. Then we've both recruited the federal agencies like Appalachian Regional Commission, Economic Development Administration, U.S. Department of Agriculture, and
ARC,
of course, and on, Appalachian Regional Commission. They're all in this heavy. In fact, USDA has included our region now in their strike force, which enables us to get to the head of the line on grants and the like. And the White House has declared our part of our region in what he calls the Promise Zone, which is incentives to locate business in the region. So we've got a lot of federal agencies involved, and of course the state's in this up to their ears. Those things are happening. You may not notice them, but they're there and they're productive.
You know, today was a strategy session, and you all have been going around during the breakout sessions and listening and talking to people. And and Governor, we'll start with you. What have you heard today from people, and where are you telling them we're going next?
Well, the overall thing I've heard, Neil, is excitement. And that is essential to the success of this SOAR effort. This is a long-term effort. And we all know that you can't turn an economy around in a day or a week or a month or a year. It's going to take a long time to diversify this economy. But it can be done. It will be done if the people of Eastern Kentucky take possession of this as their own. That's what I see up here today. It's Eastern Kentuckians. They've decided that we need to do this. And I know that when Eastern Kentuckians decide they need to do something, they'll do it. I mean, they're a sturdy people. They are a hardworking people, and they'll get this done. And we got to have the stick-to-itiveness that's necessary to do it. But going to these different sessions today, all of them were crowded. You know, sometimes when you go to these kind of things, everybody stands around in the hall and talks and does other business while the sessions are going on. Everybody was in the sessions, and it was exciting to see, as much as anything, just that engagement. And I think we'll come out of today with kind of a roadmap of how to implement some of the ideas and the recommendations that came out of those working groups that worked all of last summer and listened to people all over eastern Kentucky about what they thought the priorities ought to be.
You know, one of the things, Neil, that's held us back as a region over these years has been divisions and jealousies and old feuds being refought, so to speak. Division. And the governor and I, when we met those first times and decided we needed to try to do something, we knew that we had to, of all people, show unity, and that old divisions are laid aside. And so we set aside our political differences and have tried this joint effort in an effort to have everyone else set aside their old jealousies and old hatreds and divisions and unite together. And that's what's exciting about this so far. I don't see those divisions. I mean, they're gone.
Well, let me ask you, you have set aside those political differences and the divisions, and we're in the middle of a gubernatorial race. And this time, you know, next year, we're going to have a different governor. Have you all, either one of you, reached out to the candidates on both sides of both parties to say, hey, is this something that you're going to continue?
I was telling Hal this morning that I just talked with Jack Conway, who's going to be the Democratic nominee for governor. He's all on board with this effort, and should he win, he will be right here helping to spearhead this effort. And I know Hal will be in touch with whoever wins the Republican nomination, and I think we'll have the same commitment. And so regardless of what happens this fall, I think we'll be assured that the governor of Kentucky will continue to work with Congressman Rogers and keep this movement going.
I agree.
Our region's lost more than 7,500 coal mining jobs in the last few years. Both of you all have talked about that extensively. Just last week, 64 miners down in Harlan County lost their jobs, out of work. Families are moving away to find work. Ripple effect is devastating to our economy. How do we stop the bleeding? And you heard people talking today that they appreciate the federal assistance and the state assistance, but they want to work. They don't necessarily want a handout. How do we stop this bleeding?
Well, I think, one, the administration in Washington needs to understand that their policies are wreaking havoc on places like East Kentucky. I don't know a place in the country that's been hit harder than right here. I don't think they fully appreciate the extreme damage they're doing to people's families and their way of life and the like. Secondly, so the regulations that they've been showering forth have just wreaked havoc in East Kentucky, and that needs to stop. Secondly, they need to begin to help us more with federal help. And frankly, to be frank with you, there has been some of that here recently.
But is it like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound?
It is. It is to a certain extent. So we've been able to get monies from the feds and the state on retraining of miners. Just in the last week, we were able to get another grant from the federal government to help with the XCEP program in Hazard to retrain miners and others. So there's been some of that. But we've got to diversify our economy. We've got to supplement the coal jobs that we want to try to keep with other types of jobs. Coal mining will never produce the number of jobs that we've seen in the past. So we've got to be sensible about it and try to find supplemental pieces of work.
And there's been some good news, Neil, as the congressman's mentioned. There has been some help. I think there was a $7 million grant announced about 10 days ago or so to work with displaced miners. And I believe that Secretary Tom Perez of the Labor Department is going to be making another announcement today about a $35 million type of grant that's going to be available not just for Kentucky, but for situations like this that we'll be able to apply for. So some of that's out there, but it's tough. Even if you retrain people, if the jobs aren't here, they're going to have to pick up and go someplace else. And that's the problem we've got right now. And we've just got to start creating those kinds of jobs so that once people are retrained, they can stay here instead of having to go to someplace else. And that's kind of a chicken and the egg kind of situation. And this is, as I say, a long-term process. There's not a quick and easy answer, unfortunately.
The Kentucky General Assembly set up the Kentucky Appalachian Regional Development Fund. How will this impact their region and efforts to create those jobs that you're talking about?
Well, one of the things that we did in the legislature 2 years ago in the budget session, and then this last session, was we set aside $2 million a year in coal severance monies to go into a development fund for here in Eastern Kentucky. And this last session we passed legislation to set up that mechanism of managing that fund. And that $4 million will be set aside to work with communities. They can apply for different kinds of grants. We're just in the process of developing now the guidelines of how that money will be spent. The other exciting news is that privately, the SOAR effort has raised about $600,000 a year for 3 years, so $1.8 million, to help not only run the organization, but to have outreach and to have development efforts going on like that. And our friend Jim Host led the charge on raising that kind of private money from a lot of different sources.
Congressman, explain, and it's similar, but the federal power plant initiatives and how those are going to benefit Eastern Kentucky. Some money's already been set aside for that.
Well, we hope that works out. It's got some hurdles in Washington. The Power Plus program would require a huge increase in taxes, which I don't think is going to happen. And it would take some change in legislation to get at the Abandoned Mine Lands Fund money. That would take a special act of Congress, and our friends out in Wyoming and other parts of the country are very protective of that fund and don't want the eastern U.S. states like Kentucky to get a bigger share of the AML funds. So it's got some real problems to make it happen.
But what about now? Some funding is in the budget for 2015, right?
There is,
right.
Yeah. In the omnibus appropriations bill, we included monies in that.
And that was the Power Initiative instead of the Power Plus Initiative.
Right.
And you're right, we're going to be getting some of that money for training, and that's kind of the monies that we were talking about before going to be available to us.
I put those monies in the omnibus bill for 2015.
Okay. Now, one of the first things to come out of that first SOAR summit was the planned expansion of the Mountain Parkway. We've heard a lot of talk about that. At this point, what progress has been made, and what are the next steps in implementing that expansion? Well, the design work for the entire project is going on right now. Everything that's not four-laned is being designed to be four-laned. The legislature, in the budget that they passed, set it up in phases, and I think a couple of phases are just now under construction. A lot around Salyersville is going on right now. They're also looking at routes in terms of coming on from Salyersville up to Prestonsburg. So it's all on the books. It's all moving ahead very rapidly. There's going to be a session this afternoon here at the SOAR Summit to talk about where we are in that and what are the next stages and exactly how it'll all play out. What other highway expansion projects in Eastern Kentucky would you like to see in an effort to improve economic development? For example, what about Highway 119 between Harlan and Pineville, Highway 80, the Hal Rogers Parkway from Hazard to London? Those two, if you could get the money for that, would open up those areas, especially down in Harlan. I'm from there, so I can say it. They're kind of landlocked, and you've got to want to get there, then you got to get back out, and they've been pushing for a long time for some expansion construction on that highway. Do you see that in the near future, and would that help that region, do you believe?
Well, it'd certainly help the region, no question about that. And 80, obviously, the parts of it that are in great shape are helping already and will continue to help. The next budget will be coming up in 2016. Next year, and the road fund will be back up, and we need to be looking hard at areas like that in terms of how we can make some progress to open up other parts of eastern Kentucky that aren't blessed with quite the roads that some parts of it are now blessed with.
Has there been any push for those types of roads in other areas to this point?
Well, there's a push in every legislature from all different legislators for all different types of roads. So it's constantly a balancing act. But I think that the attention that the Congressman and I have brought to the situation in eastern Kentucky is going to make it a little easier in the next budget to zero in even more on some of those roads that are costly to do. No question about that. When you get up in the mountains, and building a mile of road in the mountains sometimes is a lot more costly than out on the flat land, because you got to tear through all kinds of things to get there. But I think we brought enough attention to it that it'll get a lot more attention.
Harlan County, I don't know of a county that is in more desperate need for road construction than Harlan. I've tried over the years to get the money for it, and as the governor says, they're extremely expensive. Limestone rock at a 45-degree angle is very expensive.
So what would you tell people in Harlan?
Well, I think the governor has said it. We'll try our best to get money for road construction in Harlan County. Of course, that comes through the state. It's not a federal thing.
And that's just a piece of the puzzle. That's one of the things we talked about today during some of the sessions. All of these are just pieces of the puzzle.
That's right.
There's no one quick fix.
And if we can get high-speed broadband to Harlan, that's going to tear down some of those barriers. It's like any place. You'll be able to be in Harlan and do business around the world because of that.
Frankly, the governor's right. I think the high-capacity, high-speed cable is the interstate highway of this age. I think they're as important to recruiting business as interstate highways were in the 50s and 60s.
Are you all pleased with the turnout that you've seen today for the second SOAR Summit?
Oh, I certainly am. I think we're both excited about, as we went around, not just the opening session this morning, which had a great crowd, but they've stayed. They're there. They're there at these working groups. They're there this afternoon.
And they're tuned in. I mean, they're excited.
How do we maintain this excitement and the engagement as we move forward?
We were talking about that at lunchtime, and that's our constant concern, quite honestly, is that a long-term effort is very hard to keep fueled and keep the excitement up. And it takes constant attention, which is going to be with the Congressman and the governor paying attention to it. And I think we've got that commitment, not only the current governor and this Congressman, but the next governor and this Congressman. That's got to be there to keep drawing attention to it. You got to continue to have things like this, because I think people need to know what's happening. They need to know, how did we move from where we were last year to where we are this year, and what's going on. But when you see all the things going on, it's pretty easy to get excited. But if you don't know about it, then that's more difficult. So we've got to constantly gear up and educate people and keep that information flowing.
And I think we've got to stay in touch. These working groups they had 50 meetings this summer, or last summer, for example. We got to stay in touch, both physically and internet-wise and otherwise. Secondly, we've got to be sure we continue to have input from everyday citizens. That's where we are here. That's the reason we put this together. So we've got to continue to have our ears wide open, listening to people's ideas. And they, I think, are coming to these meetings and taking part in SOAR because they are seeing their ideas formed into policy. I mean, we're taking those ideas and making them official. We're
going to have another SOAR Summit next year?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, gentlemen, I'll let you both wrap up. We've got just a couple of minutes, so I'll give you each about 60 seconds. But what is the next step for SOAR? Governor, let's start with you.
Well, we've got to take what we hear today and the strategies that come out of today and start scoring some early successes. Now, you know, we're having success on big things like the Mountain Parkway. People can see that. They will see this broadband project very quickly this summer, fall, winter, spring. That's going to be over the next 2 years, and you're going to see that happening. You're going to hear about it in your local communities. But we've got to take some of the ideas that are the low-hanging fruit, things that can be done quickly, and do them. And again, people see that. And I think that is going to help continue the momentum. It's going to help continue the excitement as we move into the next year.
Congressman?
I think what we're seeing with SOAR is an expression of the love of people for Eastern Kentucky. We may be poor, but we love our area. And I think that's what SOAR has sort of tapped into. Now, as long as we get people committed to do the work that we all know has to be done, as long as we can do that, SOAR will be successful. So this summit has been focused on commitment. We want people to sign a card or a letter saying, I want to help you with X, Y, or Z, and tell us what it is. They're passing out those cards here at the summit. But we also want people to be able to write in or email in and tell us of their commitment to the cause. And if you would put on your screen the email address of SOAR and the telephone number of SOAR, people could sign up right then and there.
Well, we're going to be putting that out in all of our newscasts and tonight, so we'll get that information out. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Congressman.
Neil, thanks.
Good to see you again, Governor. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week for another edition of Issues and Answers, the Mountain Edition. Have a good night.